Sorry about that. Okay. Also, hi on the live stream. Sorry. Anywho, so if you have questions and you're on the live stream, feel free to ask on that as well. Any questions are welcome for the answering, and we're so glad you're here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. So, do I just get started talking and then I'll stop when it gets embarrassing, or how do we do this?
How about you talk for a little bit, introduce yourself, introduce your work, at least 15 minutes, and then
Oh, I
let's
can do
get into
that.
questions. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, it's really great to be here. It's my first time in Seattle. It's not my first time in the U.S. The last time I was here was 23 years ago. So I spent a lot of time in New York and Los Angeles, and I used to write comedy for television in Denmark, and that's why I wanted to go here to see how people produce sitcoms. Um, I'll spare you stories about that, but when I was traveling back and forth between Denmark and the US, I discovered something that a lot of people have discovered before me, which is that there are things happening in the US that we tend to do in Europe 5 to 10 years later. Now they happen simultaneously because of the internet and social media, but it's interesting how there were cultural things and societal things that tended to happen in Europe 5 to 10 years later. And it got me interested in cultural evolution and how societies evolve. And it got me interested in the connection between technological development and societal development, and how we deal with that as individuals and as a civilization, which then got me into writing my first books in Danish about big history and the evolution of culture, civilization, and where we're heading as a species. And it doesn't look that well, let me say it that way. But what I gained from that and what I learned from that was that there is the huge impact that technology has on societal development and on everything that we do. And one of the concrete examples that I saw first was women's entry into the workforce, because the Second World War was one thing. All the men were sent off to war, and the women had to take over the jobs in the factories. But after that, the women, of course, wanted to get back to work. But it didn't really work for the women until somebody came up with the washing machine and many of the other household machines that allowed women, that allowed women to keep doing all the housework while working outside the home as well. Oh, that was shocking. So, and you got the washing machine earlier in the U.S. than we, and I guess the refrigerator as well. So you got that earlier in the U.S. than we did in Europe, and I guess we only could afford it because of the Marshall Plan. So I'm still kind of grateful to the U.S. for that. But there's a connection there between what technologies we have and what people can do with their lives. And of course, once we talk about social media and all the digitization, it becomes even more obvious. But we still don't really grasp how big this is and the huge impact that this has. So the first books that I wrote about this whole technological development and how it fundamentally changes who we are as a species, I started writing back in 2000, actually back in late 90s, but it became a full-time thing around 2000, and the first book came out in 2005 in Denmark, and I called it Both And, because we have this either-or mindset, particularly in the West. It's a Western thing. It's actually from Aristotle, who says that A cannot be B and not B simultaneously. And so we have this either-or thinking. Either something is B or it's not B. It's either black or white. It's either right or wrong. It's either you or me. And so we have this view on the world and on ourselves as it's either or. And I realized that in a globalized world, we need to embrace the both and. And where do they have the both and? They have that in the Eastern philosophy with the yin and yang. So we need to yin and yangify our Western civilization and culture, but we also need to export the either or thinking, because when we talk about human rights, when we talk about individual freedom, when we talk about um, individual happiness and pain, it is the individual who feels it. And you can only have human rights and respect that if you do see the individual as a discrete entity in the community. But you also have to have the community, otherwise you have nowhere to go be a human being. So there's both the both and the either or, and that was the basis of my thinking around 2000. And as I was writing myself into this, what actually became a 5-volume major opus of 2,300 pages of both and thinking and big history, the evolution of life and the structures that we are embedded in and that tend to govern us if we're not aware of the structures. And so my big educational insight or approach to this is that we can only be free as individuals and as a species and as societies if we can see the structures that we're in and decide whether we want to be part of them or not, and which structures we can do nothing about, and which structures we can change completely. And so my latest book is not The Nordic Secret, I'll get to that in a moment, but my latest book is actually called Libertism, which is about exactly that, that at one end of the spectrum there are systems that we can do nothing about, and we just have to live with them and accept them. Gravity is one of them. Photosynthesis is another one. And there are some biological phenomena. We can't change them. We can mess them up. I mean, we can mess up the climate, but we cannot change the fundamental mechanisms in thermodynamics in the environment. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there are things, there are systems that we can change completely. We can do anything with them that we want. And that is everything that is human-made, culture, financial institutions, the economy. We could change them if we want to. I'm not saying we should. We have to be really careful about what we change. Things that have shown a lasting quality, we may not ever be able to reconstruct that if we get rid of it first. So we have to be really careful about ruining things that we have created or generations before us have created. But we can change them. And so that is very different. And if we understand which are what, we have immense opportunities. We have opportunities with technology, we have opportunities socially, we have opportunities culturally. So we can, if we understand this, we can choose basically any kind of future that we want for humanity and this planet. And one of the systems that we can change is the economy, because if there was ever anything that is man-made, it is the economy. What is not man-made is the culture that is hardly even factored in as a resource, at least not in the economic equations. But we do depend on it, and there will be no economy if there is no biology and if there is no environment. So we need economists to actually realize that and, pay respect to it. But so that is really my background for writing The Nordic Secret, because my main agenda is to get more people to think about the big picture and where we are in history as a species and individuals in that species and in that history, because we are at a tipping point, a bifocal moment where it's like there are two paths, and one can be really a disaster and the other one can be okay or even amazing. And we need to choose which way to go and what kind of institutions we create and what kind of structures we create for ourselves and what kind of systems we create for ourselves. So that is my background for The Nordic Secret, or actually discussing with my friend Thomas Björkman. How do we deal with all the challenges that we have? And my answer to that was Bildung, education, but Bildung. I'll get to what Bildung is in a moment. And Thomas said, no, ego development. And I was like, ego development? That's just, new age mumbo jumbo. How's that ever going to be able to solve our global problems and the challenges we're facing? And Thomas was, Bildung, that's just some old German nonsense. How's that, bourgeois norms? How's that ever going to solve our problems in the 21st century? And then I started diving into um, the Bildung philosophers of the late 1700s, or the people who came up with this concept. Who were they and what were they actually saying? And ego development, what is that exactly? And Thomas gave me some books about, or recommended some books about, um, developmental psychology written by a Harvard professor named Robert Keegan. And as I was studying this for the first time, I had been reading a little bit about child psychology, but not a lot. I found that modern developmental psychology actually had a lot of overlap with the Bildung philosophy of the late 18th century in Germany. And I was surprised that many of the things that the way that they described human development and emotional development, moral development, psychological development, had so much overlap, and that there was apparent they were definitely looking at the same thing. They were coming to it from two very different approaches. Keegan from modern psychology, from business leadership, from personal development, and more of a commercial training background, but also with a lot of academic research and being part of the modern academic system. And the Bildung thinkers of the late 1700s, from a philosophical point of view, from the point of view of morality and the feudal society with a lot of oppression and very little education, and what became known as the Bildung bourgeoisie. So it's a feudal society back in the 1700s in Europe. And there's the monarchy, the king, and then there's the aristocracy. Well, actually, there's the king, there's the clergy, the aristocracy, and then there's the third estate, which is everybody else. But for the past 200-300 years, there's a group of artisans and merchants who become who's the bourgeoisie, and they become more and more of a middle class. And they are the ones who invest in, yes, slavery and colonization, but they're also the ones making the profit for it and having a lot of economic power in Europe, but without the political power to do anything about it. And so they're still living at the mercy of the royals and the aristocracy. And they start thinking, okay, so if we can't have political power and they don't pay attention to us, what can we do? Bildung, education. We can have knowledge. Knowledge is power. And so they got this Bildung bourgeoisie. But the interesting thing is that it's not just the transferable knowledge, the academic knowledge that they're focused on. It is the emotional development. It is, how do you become a moral person? How do you become a free person? How do you become somebody who is in charge of his or her own life, who has moral and individual autonomy? And so that is Bildung, and that personal development, the emotional development, is what they're focusing on. And in order to have that, you need to have culture, you need to have community, you need to have poetry, not least, you need to have beauty. And so instead of just talking about education as all this, measurable stuff that we have in the schools now, they talk about how do you become a whole person? How do you have or acquire formation as an individual? How do you build moral character? And how do we grow from aesthetics? How do we become emotionally whole persons when we interact with art and beauty and all kinds of aesthetics? It can be dance, it can be statues, it can be music, it can be paintings. And one of my major inspirations, and who's playing one of the main role in The Nordic Secret, is Friedrich Schiller, who writes about the aesthetic education of man, where he talks about three different kinds of people. And the first kind of person is the person who's in the throes of his or her emotions. We all know what it's like to see a piece of cake and knowing you're on a diet and you eat the cake anyway. If you do that with all of your life, you know what's the right thing to do, and you still do have the cake, your emotions are in charge of you, and you're not free because you cannot overrule your emotions. Then there's the other one, is that you still want the cake, You can control yourself and not eat it because you know you're on a diet. But you're only on a diet and know you can't eat it because everybody else is watching. So you do what everybody else expects. And you stay away from the cake because everybody else would look down on you if you ate it. So you're not a free person either and can't eat the cake because everybody would look down on you if you ate it. The free person is the person who can feel his or her own emotions and who has also internalized the norms of everybody else. And once you have both of them inside you, you need to choose. And that's when you become a free person because you can feel your own emotions and you have internalized the norms of society, so you know how to play by the rules. Um, and that's when you can actually, and that was what Friedrich Schiller was writing about, that is when you can also handle political freedom. And the process is Bildung, and the result is Bildung. And when he called it the aesthetic education of man, is because he said, okay, so this emotional person, how does that person become aligned with society and have his emotions sort of shaped, formed by society? That is aesthetics. So when we meet music and we attune our emotions to the music that we hear, that is a way of formation into the collective emotions or the emotions of the composer and the musician. Or when you watch a painting, I mean, they didn't have movies and television back then. So, or if you watch a dance or participate in a dance, you literally become part of the emotions of that dance. Or you can sing in a choir, then you also align yourself with others. So that shapes you and forms you into the community. And it's very comfortable once you're in there. But then, in order to feel your own emotions again and be able to stand up to that community, we need to wake you up and shake you a little bit. And that's where you need a different kind of aesthetics that can shock you. So they're like, oh, wow, was it just doing what everybody else is doing? Now I can feel my emotions again. And that's where you can make the next transition. So that's why the aesthetics play a huge role here. And that was Friedrich Schiller's philosophy there. So we have a bourgeoisie who is very interested in this. And that is what I found when I looked into this whole Bildung concept and how that is, what I was talking about, what it actually meant. And what we did in the Nordic countries was that whereas this was among the Germans just a thing for the bourgeoisie, we made it a thing for everybody. We called it Folkbildung. We created schools for young peasants, young farmhands and farm girls, so that they could get some Bildung, experience aesthetics, study history, study economy, by the way, and also the legislation of the country, and discuss it. And it was not, the folk high schools as they were called, was not just about transfer of knowledge. They were actually about engaging with knowledge and discussing it with each other. And the teacher who invented the pedagogical method for it realized that when he was to capture the attention of his students, he needed to tell them stories. And once he had their attention, he could start asking questions and having a dialogue about it. And that dialogue and that interaction is actually when the Bildung happens, because that's when you're confronted with your own perceptions and everybody else's perceptions, and you go, hey, but you said something different yesterday, or what you said yesterday actually resonated with me, but then you said something completely nonsense. What did you mean? Did you mean the thing that made sense, or did you mean the nonsense? And so then you get confronted, I get confronted, and that's when you have these pushbacks that allow you to rethink what you said and who you are and what you thought was right or wrong. And so the Nordic Secret is actually is the title of the book, but it is a boarding school system for young adults called folk high schools, where the whole purpose is for individuals to find out who am I and what should I do with my life. And when you dedicate like 5 months in your formative years as a young adult to find out what's important to me, who do I want to be as an adult, who am I, who should I be, and why do the others think that I'm too weird when I say the things that I say? Is it because I'm weird or they're wrong, or are we all right about some part of it, and can we coexist disagreeing? that is when you reach that kind of maturity that allows you to go out into the world and be um, more um, self-knowing, more understanding of other people, more tolerant, and more capable of seeing things from other people's perspective, more capable of also figuring out which conflicts are important and which ones are not, and having a general, I guess, both open mind but also critical attitude towards things that you meet. And so, to bring this together, when Thomas and I had discussed this, and I hadn't started writing the book yet, we talked about how can we. Actually, I found out about this when I started writing the book in 2015, and the first edition came out in 2017. Um, the the reason for it was that we're in a situation where we do need a lot of free people who have this kind of autonomy, but who are also loyal citizens and good friends and team players who can feel their emotions and who can have meaningful conversations about what is right or wrong and how are we going to solve and address all the complex problems that we're facing and how can we collaborate around them without getting into all kinds of fights. There might be fights, but it has to be the meaningful ones, not the ones that are kind of off topic, but just group affiliated. So Bildung has both the culture and the personal development, the emotional and moral development, and poetry and culture and storytelling, and it's a much richer concept than just ego development. So um, that's the Nordic secret. That we took this concept and popularized it for everybody. It has also had a huge impact on education in general in the Nordic countries, and not everybody can afford to go to one of these folk high schools. It's about 10% of all young people in Denmark and also in the other Nordic countries. 8 to 10%. I don't know about the number in Finland, but definitely in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden who go to one of these folk high schools. And it is a critical mass of people who figure out what they want to do with their life and who get a broad understanding of the society that they're in, the world that they're in, and what their own role could be in that. So that is the Nordic secret. And for those of you who are interested in economy and societal development and the Nordic welfare state and economic systems and so forth, the economy is part of culture, and here we created a culture that is focused on both on individual autonomy and on being a team player and on taking responsibility for your society and what was it Kennedy said? Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. We've actually done that since 1851, so under a different name. It works every time when people actually do it. So that's part of the Nordic secret. Yeah, that was me.
We're gonna have someone come up and help with questions now. So if you have any questions, raise a hand. And we're also gonna have cards, like I said.
I've heard rumors about somebody writing a whole page of questions, so.
Hi everyone, I'm Tish. We've already met. I'm a business professor here, and welcome to Impactful Investing's first event ever. So we're all excited. Thank you. Yay, cheers. Awesome. But thank you, Lene, for the amazing introduction and your inspiration behind this book and in life and everything. I am really curious to learn more about the yin and yang thing. Let's apply it here. And I believe a large part of this experience is supposed to be you learning from the students as well.
Yes.
So perhaps we could open the floor to any experiences you'd like to share about what helped you find your path in life, what brought you to North, and just share that with Lena, and let's take it from there. So would anyone like to share about your experiences and what brought you to North, what your passions are?
You would like the microphone. Oh, there's a microphone on
All right. Hello. Okay, so this
It's on. It's good.
it's on? You
Yep.
sure? Can you hear me? Great. So this is a good time to tell you that I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing, but I guess I could do that introduction thing that you were talking about. Uh, I'm a student here at North. I guess enrolled here after college because of the what's it called? The Seattle Promise. Great program. Gets people into school with at no cost. Talk about high reward, low risk. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to. I think that's.
Why are you here?
Oh, why am I here? I love money, and I
You love money?
Yeah, um, yeah. Financial freedom's always been a huge thing for me, and actually, it's how I am. We attended a couple of I'll say the room upstairs. They had a couple. I don't know what you'd call them, meetings about basically like investing, and I was hoping this would be something similar. But yeah.
So this is about investing in who you are.
Yeah, actually, and that's actually something I've always, not always, but a friend of mine actually told me a while back that I needed to start investing in myself. And when they said that, the first thing that my mind jumped to was literally how much money's in my bank account. And then they're like, no, that's not at all what I mean. And then they're like, invest in yourself. And I was like, going to the gym. And I was like, and they're like, no, that might be part of the thing, but it's more about like they more meant like my mental health and making sure that I was absolutely sure of who I am and what I want, and blew my mind because any time before then when anyone would tell me about investing in yourself, the only thing I think of is how many zeros are in my account. But yeah,
So that blew my mind aspect of it. What was that about?
that was just about the only time where I've ever thought about investing being like purely financial and never about the self. And yeah, I never thought about it.
Isn't that amazing that you never thought about that before?
Never, not at all. And I didn't even think it. Well, never even had that realization until junior-ish year of college. And that's a pretty long way to go before realizing that.
You could be so much more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are your what do you really love doing?
Uh,
If there's no money involved, what do you love doing?
if there's no money involved, a couple quarters ago, and I know this might still sound like it's about money, but I really love computers and I like writing software. Uh, Usually just not waste time, but when I'm doing it, I can lose lots of hours, and sometimes it's less boring, and I want to get through it, and it's great. But nowadays, I'm more into networking, and I know that's still somewhat school related, but I find the internet really, really fascinating, and so I'm trying to understand more of it than I probably should even want to know.
But how
or
can you understand more than you should?
more than I should need to know?
Ah, need to know.
Yeah,
You bought into that.
yeah, yeah.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, so you are a university level student and you bought into the need to know. Doesn't that say something about the system that you're in?
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Prob-
this is the you're on the right path here. You're like opening to, hey, there's all this stuff that I don't need to know, but it's important to me. And you're actually unfolding something inside you that is uniquely you.
Yeah.
And it blew your mind. It makes you happy,
It does.
and it gives you energy.
Lots of energy.
Exactly. You want to study more.
Yeah.
You can't get enough of it.
Can't get enough. Actually, me and my brother just completely redid our network at home, and it was, again, didn't have to.
I mean, you almost got high.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's legal.
Absolutely.
I hope. I
legal.
mean, I don't know what you did with the network, but yeah.
True.
So this is what Bildung is about. This is the folk high schools in a nutshell. Imagine you could go away for 5 months and just do that, together with other, I don't know how old you are, but like-minded or
Yeah.
like-spirited people. And some of them are into computers, some of them are into music, some of them want to study history, and there you got 5 months together, and you live together, you eat together, and you study together, and you can explore whatever you want to study depending on the school. Some of the schools today are focused on music, some of them are focused on design, some of them are focused on, I don't know, outdoors and sports. But many of them have a very broad general offering of all kinds of topics. And then you can just dive into the things that you really care about, and you can find others who are interested in the same things. And then they have, presentations, lectures by speakers from the outside, and also some of the teachers who introduce you to stuff you never heard about. And it was like opening your mind to something you never thought might be interesting, and hopefully you'll find it interesting, or you'll say, "Oh, thank God I never chose, a full semester on that stuff, because that is not what I want to spend my time on." So, yeah, congratulations.
I actually wish I could experience that because I feel like ever since I've started this whole journey, I guess even from a younger age, I've liked computers, but I kind of wonder what my life would be like if I didn't know, or if maybe not computers didn't exist, but if they weren't such a huge part of my life. I wonder how different I would be. Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was a kid, there were no computers, so I would have been a complete computer geek if they had been available when I was 8 or 10 years old. I don't know what Bill Gates have. We're probably 10 years apart, but I mean, it's like, yeah, I got a red bicycle. He got a computer. Look at him and look at me. So we're all we're all product of the circumstances, but you would have found something else without computers, hopefully. But I'm glad you found what you like. So that is very much what this is about.
Yeah.
And the great thing about finding that one thing that, or several things that give you all that energy, is that now you don't need any kind of motivation, and you want to do the best that you can with this. And one of the things that we're going to explore, so we started a think tank in Copenhagen called Nordic Bildung, and one of the things that we're going to explore is how can we change where companies for the past 100 years have poured in business psychology. I think they should start pouring in business Bildung instead, so that we can find that energy in people and make sure that that is what you bring to your life, and that you can then be happy when you go to work. Not because we want you to stay overnight at work. It shouldn't be a tool for abusing people. But if you care about what you do in the way that you're talking about it here, you also care about it so much that I bet you're going to make different moral decisions and moral choices or ethical choices about how you're going to use this technology than if you're just in it for the money. So in the time that we're in, where we do need to make very different kinds of decisions in the corporate business world and in all kinds of institutions, we need not just decision makers, but throughout all the layers or all the aspects of the organization, where people have that sense of joy and they don't want what they love to be ruined by the wrong values and the wrong moral or immoral guidelines and profit seeking. And so we're only going to survive as a species, I think, if we get that kind of energy into the work life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's beautifully put. And that was the entire inspiration behind this club as well. And this discussion reminds me of the word amateur versus professionalism. We have been raised in a society where to find a professional job to make money is overemphasized. And the word amateur comes from the word amor. And it's defined as doing something for the love of doing it. And you're doing it, you're embodying it. And honestly, this club was founded to bridge that. I want to do what I love, but I also want to have an impact. And so maybe, join the club. And this is like a great step one into doing what you want to be doing, which is making money, but also love what you're doing. So this was all.
I mean, of course you want to make a living, and you want to, be able to, raise a family and have a life. I home, yes. as I drove up here, I just saw one of these homeless
Yeah.
camps, and it just, I knew it was there. I hadn't seen it live before. I just arrived here yesterday. So it just breaks my heart that we have a society where we cannot figure out to uh, get everybody to have a home. It's a disgrace. We also have homeless people in Denmark. The last time I was here, I could proudly say we have 3 homeless people, and we probably had more, but you never saw them, and now you see them. So there's something where we've fundamentally failed as a civilization because everybody should have a home.
Thank you so much. So now I have a question that's written out in advance. If you wanted readers to have one takeaway from reading your book, what would it be?
Uh, it would be that education should start with the student and not with the goal. So that whenever you have students coming to you, whether it's first grade or university or wherever it is, or as a grandmother talking to your grandchildren, whatever you want to call a student, it should be about finding, unlocking, unfolding what that person has. Because we're all born as unique beings. We have different talents, we got different desires, we got different urges and different dreams. And our role as teachers should be to find that, or allow each person to find it, because very often we don't know it. And that's why the folk high schools and this whole building tradition is so important, because you get to experience a taste of different things and find things that you hadn't thought might be interesting. And one thing that very often happens at these folk high schools is that young people go there with a dream of becoming an actor or a professional musician, and then they realize that, oh well, maybe I should be a music producer or just work in the music industry and get a real education, because I do not have the talent or the drive that would allow me to succeed as a professional musician. Or the other way around also happens, where you have young people who are like, I'm probably gonna, should I study medicine or should I study physics? Yeah, I don't know, I'll go to folk high school and check it out. And then they realize that once they stand on a stage in front of an audience, they come alive and they just want to take this, professionally. And so there are people who went to folk high schools not knowing what to do with themselves, and they're now professional singers and artists in Denmark. So figuring out who are you and why are you here, that should be the purpose of education. And then there will be goals. And some people will reach them, but they will actually be better at whatever they're doing if they find out why they do it and who they are. So, when we train doctors and plumbers and nurses and I don't know, there should be some professional standards. And of course, we need to make sure that we only allow people to perform certain professions with the knowledge that they need to do that. But they need to be in those professions for the right reasons, and they need to find out what those right reasons are.
Thank you. And I'm sensing a theme of purpose finding here, which is a luxury, one might argue, because even for the schools, there's like 10% of the population that make it. And so, what would you say would be a baby version of this that we could incorporate, not as a luxury in our education system, but to have the access to this discovery journey?
I think that even formal education and the existing programs could do a lot by switching the focus and opening the school year or the semester, or at least the beginning of a program, with a couple of weeks of exploring why am I here and who am I, with and among the students and also the teachers, professors. And part of the folk high schools is that, at least traditionally, the teachers used to live there and eat with the students as well and study. I mean, you cannot become a folk high school teacher without sharing some of yourself and actually being there on, in some respects, equal terms as everybody else. And I just want to share a piece of U.S. history. You just heard it about an hour ago, but let's hear. How many people recognize the people on the cover here? The two green guys, I can say, are Goethe and Schiller, but there's a woman in a black and white picture here. I don't know if you can see it from a distance. Yes, it's Rosa Parks. And so the question is, of course, why is Rosa Parks and Goethe and Schiller on the same book cover? Because these Danish folk high schools caught the attention of Miles Horton, who was a teacher in Tennessee in the 1920s when there was a depression, and the white people were poor, but the black people were even poorer. It was really miserable. And he knew that there was some kind of education missing for adults, and he heard about the Danish folk high schools, and so he went to Denmark and spent a year there and realized that he had to start a folk high school in the US. So he went to Tennessee, back home, and started Highlander Folk School. And he did that in 1930, 32 or something like that. And he started they started a reading program. One of them was Septima Clark, was one of the teachers there, and eventually one of the students was Rosa Parks, and she spent 2 weeks there. And one of the things that, I mean, it's just she experienced for the first time sitting down with white people and sharing a meal at the same table, which was not legal in Tennessee at the time. And that experience made some kind of complete personal change transformation to her, because if that was possible in that place, so much else could be possible. And then when eventually she was supposed to give up her seat on the bus, she decided to keep it. And that is Bildung. I mean, that is really becoming that free person who has his or her emotions, knowing what everybody else expects, but feeling that, no, I'm human. I'm just as human as you are, and I'll keep my seat. So, and that changed the history of the United States. And so you can do that. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
I would say having her courage is a little bit out of the ordinary, but it's the same thing. And we face similar choices, perhaps smaller choices, in so many situations.
Yeah.
And this is the education that is about. So who are you? And what do you want to do with your life? And having black people and white people discussing that in the 1950s, that was quite something.
Yeah, courage is a huge thing, and it's almost like enlightenment, almost the concept of Bildung, but
Yeah.
enlightenment about ourselves and what
Yeah.
we want. So I have some questions from the audience. What role does trust play in Nordic societies, and how is it fostered through institutions?
There's a lot of focus on trust, and I think it's highly overrated. It's important, but what brings it about, and that's the good thing about the second part of the question, is responsibility. I think what we have in the Nordic countries is a high sense of responsibility, and we get that from the Bildung part. And so when you have a general high level of responsibility, you build trust. Once people stop showing responsibility, the trust disappears. The interesting thing is that, well, you can't demand trust from people, because if you say, trust me, the first thing you're going to do is doubt me. But I can demand responsibility from you and say, you know what, this is your responsibility. If you do it, you've shown responsibility. If you don't, you failed. And then you can say, is this reasonable or not? But I can demand responsibility within certain limits. But I can't demand that you trust me. On the other hand, it's kind of easy to discuss trust, because you can't if you have a conference about responsibility, it actually puts responsibility on you. So it's a bit uncomfortable. So it's easier to talk about trust because you can always claim that you have the feeling, but you can't demand it. So there's a lot of trust research, there's a lot of trust surveys, but there's not a lot of responsibility surveys. And it probably would be hard to survey responsibility because if you ask people about their trust, it's like not in any kind of it's not dangerous to say that you have high levels of trust, but if you say you have high levels of responsibility, you probably know you're lying if you say so. So we talk a lot about trust, but responsibility is the foundation under it. And then yes, we do have high levels of or responsibility is the foundation. We do have high levels of trust, and it does make a huge difference. Right now in Denmark, um, we are seeing the consequences of have a trust-built society when there are people who do not show the responsibility because we do not have the checks and balances that will catch the non-responsible people. And we have an environmental scandal in Denmark right now with a company called Nordic Waste, and they have received a lot of money for handling dirty soil. Turns out they basically just dumped it somewhere and didn't clean it up, and they happen to have dumped it in a what do you call it geological place with some clay that with a lot of water becomes like soap. So we have this big slide of polluted soil that is sliding into a stream and is threatening a village. And it turns out that both the municipality and the company and the authorities that do soil testing rely on companies' own testing of their own soil. So it builds on trust. We have trusted the companies because we used to be able to do that. Now we have a company that's not responsible or doesn't show responsibility, and therefore, I don't know if they didn't do the testing or they didn't, if they handed in wrong testing or nobody tested the foundation under it, but the trust-based system simply doesn't know how to handle people who do not live up to the responsibility. So now we see the result.
Yeah, and I think that theme of trust and responsibility also reminds me of the conversation we had a little earlier about people who can't be forced to go and discover themselves. They have to want to discover themselves.
Right.
So it's like the accountability of wanting to find out more about ourselves has to fall on the student to go and then be like, okay, now I really need to figure out what I want out of this, what I want out of my life, and what I'm passionate about. And then it kind of builds on that concept. Like they have to want to do good to be the business that will actually take care of the polluted soil. But if they don't want to do it, they'll find all sorts of loopholes to find their way
Right, they'll
around
just,
it.
spend their time and energy on finding the loopholes and not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So this brings me to the next audience question. Who do you most wish would read your book?
Policymakers. Definitely, because we need to invest in education, and we need to invest in a different kind of education, and we need to do it fast. And it's not just young people. I mean, it's everybody. And one of the really, really sad things about the existing school system is that so many people, adults, when you say to them, we need to educate ourselves, re-educate ourselves. We need to have new knowledge. Technology is tearing society apart. We have new technologies that we need to contain. We need to use them better, all that stuff. So we all need to learn new stuff. And people are like, you want me to go back to school? No way. Because going to school has been such a bad experience. That is the last thing the last place you want to spend your spare time if you have a day job. And even if you don't have a day job, you don't want to go there either. So if I were to design a system that would kill all curiosity in children, because a non-curious child was never born. So if I wanted to kill that curiosity, I would take 25 to 40 kids in the same age group, born within the same year. I would put them into one room, and then I would tell them to sit still for 45 minutes and only speak if I allowed them to. I wouldn't allow them to speak to the person next to them either. And if they wanted to go pee or anything, they would have to get my permission for it. And then I would talk for 45 minutes, or have them read from stuff for 45 minutes. And then I would test if they could regurgitate what I told them. And if they couldn't do that, I would give them the impression that they were stupid. And then I would be absolutely sure that I'd killed all curiosity in them within a couple of years. So we do something wrong with the existing education. And I understand why we do it, because when we invented the current educational systems, it was at the beginning of the industrial era, and it was, really crucial that as many people as possible got as much knowledge inside their heads as possible, because we didn't have places for people to go find it, and they needed to maneuver in a completely new kind of society and economy. But in the meantime, so many things have changed, and we have so many more resources, and we haven't changed the school system. And the interesting thing about many interesting things about ChatGPT, but when that came out, one of the first reactions from the educational system was, how do we prevent students from cheating?
Yeah.
It's like, that's not the issue. The issue is, how do we educate so we compete with social media, with ChatGPT, and with all these opportunities that everybody with a cell phone or an iPad have for entertainment instead of learning stuff? How do we make learning so much more interesting than all this stuff that's on the internet, including making, prompts that give us a cartoon picture of a cat eating cupcakes in, I don't know, cyberspace or something like that.
Love that. Yeah, and sorry. Go ahead with your question. Yeah.
So can we have a microphone for our friend here?
I'm kind of so you just described school.
You either have to hold the microphone differently or turn it on.
Oh, it's already
Yes,
on.
now
so
it's there.
Guess I just got to keep it closer to me. So you just described school, which makes sense. I'm not a huge fan of the school system either, but there are some parallels with this current arrangement that we're all in, with the exception that I believe all of us want to be here. But how would you go about educating a person and or a people who didn't want to be?
Yeah, so actually one of our greatest joys is learning. And whoever designs apps has figured that out, because there is no limit to our interest in downloading new apps and learning how they function. So they actually employ psychologists to figure out how we spend the most time on the apps that we have on our cell phones. And we have not employed our knowledge about pedagogy and how people learn the most in the most interesting and pleasurable way. We have the knowledge. We just don't do education like that. And what Kristen Cole did with his first folk high school was that he started by telling stories. And I'm doing a project with a Danish public school 100 kilometers south of Copenhagen, and we're trying to create a polymodern education program, so we include the historical development in the curriculum. But I told the teachers that there are 3 things I want you to do with the kids, and you can start that right away without any kind of program, and it's really crucial for Bildung. One is read stories and tell stories to the kids. And so when I was a substitute teacher, reading a story to them was something you did at the final 10 minutes of the lesson, if we had spare time or if they had behaved well, so it was like a treat, because it's seen as a luxury. Telling stories is the most fundamental thing you can do with children. That's how they learn, because children want to be good. may not always feel like that when you're a parent or one of the adults around them, but they really want to do good and be good and live up to the expectations of adults. And that's the reason why we tell stories, is to tell stories about what are good or bad people. And so they want to know, and that's why they love stories. So storytelling is one of the most important things you can do with the kids. Don't see it as a luxury. See it as the first thing you need to do with the kids. The second thing is sing with them. And the third thing is dance with them. And what you get from storytelling is that you expand their vocabulary. You allow them to develop their inner movie theater and create images in their own mind, which whenever we hand them iPads or movies or TV programs, we present them with pictures so they don't get trained in generating their own images, which is a really crucial part of being human, that you can envision things. And it also expands their vocabulary, and they learn the cultural heritage and lore and all these references that allow us to share vast information just by a few single words. The same thing with singing, particularly if you do some of the traditional songs. There will be words in there that doesn't make any sense to them. But there will also be words that don't make sense now, but later it'll be like, oh, that was from that song or hymn. And then there's the dancing, which, like singing, allows you to listen in to other people and coordinate yourself with them, which is a crucial part of being human. And what I brought up with them, and I've done it with other teachers as well, and I don't know how popular it is among the parents or how they're going to introduce it at the parents' meeting, but one of the reasons why they need to attune themselves to others physically. You also do that when you just, rough and tumble play and get into fights. That is when you develop your sense of empathy. It's not something that you can teach. It's not transferable knowledge. It's non-transferable knowledge. And if you hurt somebody, if you get into a fight, poke their eye by mistake and they start crying, or, pinch them, or that is when you feel that they're hurting. And I have a claim, which is that if kids don't have that kind of learning, they will grow up, and as adults they will be really horrible lovers. So if you want your children to have a healthy sex life as adults, you need to allow them to play and make mistakes and hurt their peers and hug their peers and laugh and do all the stuff that we try to prevent them from because we want to protect them. Because the only way you can be a good lover is if you can actually feel what your partner is feeling. And you can only learn that by actually interacting with other people. And then there's the thing about learning the vocabulary and the lore. And I'm going to say a very short sentence. And given that I assume we're all Westerners here to some extent.
From Singapore.
Yeah, but you've
Been here long enough.
yeah, so you're quite familiar with the pop culture in the West. Okay, so I'm gonna say a single sentence, and then I bet that in your mind is gonna open up a series of images, maybe even some music, a whole cultural epoch, and a lot of other things. And the sentence is, the name is Bond, James Bond. See?
I love that. That is so accurate.
It's like, whoa! And that is what it means to have culture. This is spirit. We share this because we've seen all those stories, and we've heard the music, and we have all these references. And we can even, this is really bizarre, but we can even have, particularly after a couple of beers, we can have a discussion about who is the right James Bond. Who? You were saying? No way! It's Sean Connery. So, there's this 100% fictitious character, and we can discuss who's the right actor for that, which is quite amazing. But that's part of storytelling, and that's the power of storytelling, and that's why it's so important.
It's absolutely important. Thank you so much for your question. So I would like to take a minute to maybe have a reflective question from the audience. Could we have two people share what killed your curiosity about something?
One of the biggest ways that killed my curiosity as a child and adult learning is really the memorizing and kind of the standardized testing. The here's what you need to know, here's what you need to remember, take the test, and it's done.
Yep.
We called it, I know it as data dumping, right? You just remember all you can and then take the test and then throw it out the window, move on to the next one. So that is definitely not encouraging to look further into the what's this really about kind of thing.
Thank you so much. Could one more person share about what killed your curiosity?
Me. My teacher in fifth grade, he said, "You better find something else to do because you're not going to be a writer."
Are you a writer?
No.
Okay, but you could have been.
All right. It's heartbreaking, actually.
It is. It's horrible.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable.
So I would actually like to add one thing because, and I don't know if I should have started with that, but it's probably a good time to introduce this because the way that I describe Bildung now, this formation, personal character, in order to make it more tangible also for educators, is that there's two different kinds of knowledge. And one kind of knowledge is the transferable kind of knowledge. And so it's a horizontal transfer from person to person and from teacher to students or from medium to student. And you can expand your horizon in all kinds of directions. So it's a horizontal kind of knowledge. But the vertical kind of knowledge, the emotional depth and the life experience, you cannot share that. You cannot transfer it. And you can try to tell other people about it. But if they have not had a similar experience, they don't know what you're talking about. So if you've fallen in love and you're acting like you do when you're falling in love, and somebody try to tell to somebody that you just fell in love and it's just amazing, and if that person has never experienced it, like, what are you talking about? It doesn't mean you have to be crazy. But if they've experienced it and you say you've fallen in love, there's a resonance and they know exactly what you're talking about. Same thing with, I don't know, giving birth to a child or having a new job and not know how to behave around your new colleagues, or working with somebody who's impossible to work with, or all these life experience moments. And this is what gives you this emotional depth. And this is also where you need your upbringing, so your moral value system and the behavioral norms that have been installed in you from your parents and others, so that you can actually interact with complete strangers and get some life experience and not make a complete ass out of yourself or anybody else. And the combination of the two is Bildung, and the struggle with them is Bildung. And Bildung is, in that regard, both very individual, because we're all different. We have, as I said, different talents, different skills, different potential, different interests, different intelligence. And so, even though we may have been exposed to the same horizontal transfer of knowledge, it lands differently inside each one of us because of the, how we're born, but also because of the emotional depth and the life experiences. But it's also a social thing, because you cannot get these life experiences without other people, and you don't get the pushbacks and the failures and the successes and the emotional connection to life unless you interact with other people, and that's part of life. So it's both the individual and the social thing, and part of your building, of course, as Schiller said, is becoming socialized into the common norms. So uh, we've created a school system that is so focused on the horizontal transfer of knowledge, and they've paid no attention to your meaning making, your emotions around this, and particularly not yours, which is like a horrible thing to say. It's like, so yeah.
So building on that, what can students in Seattle do to advance global Bildung?
Uh, I mean, very concretely, we have a global Bildung network where you're most welcome to join. It's online, and it started during COVID, but we probably. So the interesting thing about COVID is that before COVID, you couldn't just send strangers an email and say, "Hey, I read your work or I saw your video on YouTube. Uh, I find it fascinating. Do you have time for a Zoom meeting?" Now you can, and some people actually say yes, depending on who you are, of course, and how you approach them. But so during COVID, actually right before COVID, David Brooks wrote about the Nordic Secret in the New York Times, which got a lot of Americans interested in the book, and some of them wrote me, and after having talked to a couple of them, I put them together in a Zoom meeting, and we started creating a little North American Bildung Zoom group. And then after we had a European Bildung Day online, we used to do it, we've done it once live in Berlin, then we moved it online, and some of the Americans joined, and so did a guy in India, and somebody from Africa, and we were like, hey, maybe we should make a global Bildung network, so we did. And now we have twice per year on equinox, so when the day has the same length around the globe, we do a tour around the globe, starting in Oceania with speakers and Bildung perspectives from either Australia or New Zealand. And then we go to East Asia, Asia, Middle East, Africa, Europe, Latin America, North America. And you can join. You don't have to. So we started out with 24 hours. Now it's down to 18. But we do have an hour and 45 minutes in each culture zone. And you can join anytime during the day as it suits your time schedule and hours on the day. But it's a lot of fun, and this time on March 21st, it's going to be about what it means to be human, building traditions from around the globe, past, present, and future. We also have a book coming out with the same title on that day. So there, we got Ubuntu from Africa. There's human ecology, which used to be a big thing in the American school system. And there is Buen Vivir from Latin America, and we got somebody from China who writes about, and who will always also be speaking, who writes about Bildung based on Confucius, Taoism, and Buddhism.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I would like to ask two questions combined because they're both focused on economics. The first is, do you think it would make economics better or worse to tax assets higher than products and income? And the second close question is, how do you think we should go about changing the current economic systems while having to live in them?
So the reason why we tax the things that we do now is because we have the industrialized capitalist economy. Before we had that, we taxed something else. We taxed land, and you gave a tenth to the church, I think. And you paid it in grain if you didn't have any money, or you paid it in silver if you had it. And then we gradually invented capitalism, and something else could be taxed. And then the steam engine, and then you had workers who had salaries. The vast majority of people in the feudal economy before the steam engine didn't have jobs that paid them money. So there wasn't any money you could tax. You couldn't tax income. There was no income. So you could tax land. But now you had people with income, so you could tax that. And now we have cyberspace, and we got data, and we got algorithms. So I think we should start taxing that, because that's where the value creation is. So we should look at what's the value creation, and what would be the right balance between taxing land, property, assets, income, income from investments, and profit, and algorithms, and data, and cyberspace.
Value creation. It's like business 101. We have to learn how to identify it,
Yeah.
right? Yep. So, going off of value creation, do you have suggestions for addressing billionaires and businesses having as much money as a whole government and the ability to buy influence?
Government needs to fucking wake up, because this should not be a. I mean, this should not be a surprise. It's been obvious for I don't know how long. The annual revenue of Walmart is bigger than the national GDP of Denmark. And now you have tech giants that are bigger than, I don't know, both Switzerland and the Nordics combined and stuff like that. So, and the reason is that there are two different kinds of. I mean, you can look at nations as economies, which we've decided to do, which is ridiculous. There's so much more. But the marketization has just entered our minds, so everything is just evaluated, valued, and defined by money. And one of the fundamental differences between companies and nations is that nations need to take care of their citizens. That's why we decided to have them. And they can't expand. We call that war, and at least some of us decided we didn't like that and don't want it. Russia seems to be of a different opinion. And that's a problem. It's a huge problem. There are other places where there's a similar. It's like, hey, we'll just go kill our neighbors and take their land or whatever is the real idea behind this war in Ukraine. But companies have this actually a mindset and vocabulary from the army where you conquer markets and you kill your competitors. And they can expand globally as long as there are people out there who have not bought their products. And when you had the physical economy of the industrialized society, so physical products and services, there was geographical gravity to everything you produced. So we tended to first cater our home market, and then the neighboring markets, and then maybe the global market, but it was only the really big players who could do that. And maybe, Coca-Cola, a couple of car companies and things like that. But once you go into digital products, they're global the moment they're released, unless there's deliberate attempts at stopping it. Which means that you have a market, a global market, as long as there's one person out there that hasn't downloaded your app yet or bought your cell phone. So, it's a completely different situation, and the political structures are nation-state based, and now the economic structures are internet-based, and the nation-states have not figured out a way to regulate this. The EU is doing pretty well. Not good enough, but pretty well, and it's interesting that even some of the US tech giants are asking the US government to do like the EU, because they can't get into the European market without playing by the EU rules. And it's actually a disadvantage to them that the US doesn't have the same rules, so they can compete on equal terms inside the US. So I find that really interesting. And we need to have a completely different perspective on the balance between corporate businesses and private initiative on the one side, and then our democratic societies on the others, and political freedom and human rights and all the things that the states are there to take care of, because none of the companies were started to protect our human rights.
Amen to that. So the Nordic system seems to have figured out how to create a symbiotic relationship between the institutions and the company and education. So, and empowering people from bottom up. So while researching for your book, did you come across any shocking piece of fact or information?
I mean, I was surprised that Denmark has to that extent been an educational social entrepreneur, and that so much of all the good country qualities that I mean, happiest people and best for business and high levels of trust, strong democracies, good for the world, all that stuff where the Nordic countries are constantly in the top somehow. That a lot of it originated in Denmark. I thought that it was probably Swedish inventions or Norwegian ones. It turns out that we were the originators, and it has surprised me. I don't know if it's shocked me, but it has surprised me that that we have not. I mean, it's been a secret even to the Danes and the other people. I mean, the Nordics, that we've done this, and the way that we've done it, and that. So it's. I mean, we're not happy because there's like this euphoria throughout society or at the top of society. We're constantly the happiest peoples in the Nordics because there's misery at the bottom that is not there. So the average goes up. And eliminating that misery at the bottom really comes from a sense of responsibility and caring about all of society, not just me and my family, but actually the whole country. And we can thank our educational system and the folk high schools for that. And it surprises me, and it still surprises me, that we're not more interested in the Nordic countries in promoting these ideas. And people are afraid of this being, oh, so that's just going to be a new kind of colonialism. It's like, I don't think so, because the core in this is actually local culture and local cultural heritage, and getting to know where you're coming from and what grew out of this soil, literally flora and fauna, and also the climate locally. What are the stories in this place, and what are the stories in that place, and how are you meaning making regarding this, and what are your stories about this? But the structure around it, the educational method, we ought to be able to export that, and we ought to be able to inspire people to say, hey, we need to do education in a different kind of way, and let's explore that. And there has been a success story here. Let's see what we can take from that and learn from that. And we could be much better at being active doing that. So that is surprising me. Is there anything particular you had in mind with the question? Because I have said a few things earlier today, so.
No, this was an audience question about what shocked you in your research, but personally, that was one of my biggest takeaways, that this this system is almost decolonization.
I would say
Yeah.
so. So yeah.
Like embracing individuality, embracing individual strengths, and growing from that, valuing value creation in diversity. It's all, my brain was in that area this entire time, and I loved that we sort of are ending on this note a little bit. So that was my personal biggest takeaway on how it is possible to create value from diversity. It is possible to create a society because you're doing it. It is being done from individuals coming together and then finding value in differences and then creating strength as a society from that. So let's go around the audience and share our biggest takeaways from today. And we will end with Lena telling us about your biggest takeaway from today as a wrap up, if that's okay. So let's start with Bob.
Thank you. Well, I mean, my biggest takeaway from today is like a year ago, I didn't know who Lena was, never heard of her. And so I'm just flabbergasted this actually happened. You know, I mean, it's a tribute to the fact that you can dream up stuff and then see it materialize. And I hope every student in the room figures out that you can do that too. Then on the diversity theme, I think I'll just toss out there that the number one author that got me on the trail of where Lena's at, Bell Hooks.
All about love.
Hi, guys. Hi, Lene. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. My biggest takeaway from today is to link with my friend there in the front. Sometimes we're just not self aware enough to understand that we are the things that we need to do is not necessarily what we're doing because there's so many other things out there, so many distractions. So, the thing that I'm going to go home to do tonight is to reflect a bit and see if I'm actually doing what I need to be doing and not just distracted by everything that society is pushing at me.
That's awesome. Cool.
Hello. Uh,
Hi.
so thank you for coming here. Also enjoyed the talk, and throughout your talk, it gave me time to reflect on my own decisions and journey. And I feel like my 5 month of finding myself was more than 5 months. I would say it was probably throughout the whole quarantine period of COVID. So that time was probably the time when I was asking myself all those questions. And I think most of the decisions I've made after that was due to that time of isolation and what I want my life to go, where I want it to go, and where I see myself and what I want to accomplish, and basically find out who I am, you know? So it was bittersweet quarantine. So once you run out of things to watch and to entertain yourself with, you're just stuck with your thoughts and feelings, and you just have nothing but to face them, whether they're bad or good. So it's good to reflect. And this talk definitely has made me reflect again and made me think about my goals again. So,
So, is there something that you really love doing?
uh, I I want to say learning, but I'm struggling with that too. So, I do like learning, and I like learning to invest. And my friend over there, I don't know if he likes money as much as I do. But I think I like money a lot. But I also I'm aware that money is not everything, and I want to have integrity, and I want to really make an impact as well. And I participate in my community, but I don't really speak out, so I kind of want to work on speaking, or I don't really like socializing unless I'm forced to. So, still on that journey.
Sounds like the right journey for you.
What was it?
Sounds like the right journey for you. So, that's
Yeah,
good.
so it's a journey full of ups and downs, and yeah, every day's a journey.
So, I hope you can find some similar folks here, and also open up to discussing that with others, and finding out what's right for you together with others. Because that's probably where you're going to find the most joy, and also satisfaction when you can collaborate with others around what you enjoy. I mean, you did it with your cousin, your brother, yeah, yeah, best friends. So it's part of really feeling the opening and the joy. So, but it's good that you started, and I'm happy you're here.
Yeah. And I had one question for you.
Yes, please.
So, if the U.S. was to adopt what you said, like the EU system of forcing all these huge companies into regulations, do you think that's ever possible? One, and two, if so, what do you think are the unintended consequences from this? How would it affect our current economy?
So, first of all, yes, I do think that the EU regulations can be implemented in the US as well. It's really interesting with the GDPR regulation of personal data, because 5 years ago, whenever I went on an American website, app, or anything, and looked for privacy on the website, there was nothing. today, if I go on any kind of major American website or service or anything and look for privacy, it says GDPR. So even though the GDPR regulation is not in the United States, they still apply by the rules because they know they can't sell their products in the EU unless they play by the rules. So I think we can be much more proactive on both continents for creating better regulation, and we could actually collaborate about it. That would be really great. For the economy, I think long term, it will definitely be the only thing that can save the economy from the technological development. What I think is going to happen is that artificial intelligence is actually going to undermine capitalism itself. Because if you have an artificial intelligence that keeps track of all the trading on the stock markets, eventually it will be smart enough to buy and sell everything in the right moment and own everything. And poof, end of capitalism. So we'll have to figure out how to make a sustainable economy for the sake of the economy, and not just a environmentally sustainable economy, but an economy that can keep running even with the inventions that it's producing.
Thank you.
Hi. Well, thank you so much, really, for being here tonight. I think the big takeaway of this is I haven't read the entire book. I'm 20 pages in, though. But I love the concept of building, and now that I can, like, I think envision it a little bit better. You know, I really think myself that I am on this building journey. I've been doing it, I think. So so thank you. I really appreciate that, and I love to see how there is this other option, alternative option, that it brings all together. So thank you.
I mean, we're all on a building journey. We always are. You can't be around other people without something happening. But there has been an unfortunate tendency to talk about people with and without Bildung, because there are we, the builded people, and those who don't have Bildung. And that's the kind of bourgeois stereotype of the Bildung people are the ones who read Shakespeare and Proust and know who Mozart was and stuff like that. So there is a misunderstanding of what it is. But I think the Rosa Parks example is really good, because if there ever was Bildung, that's her. So we have to understand it from that perspective.
My thing is just that I was reminded that people don't hate learning. People just may hate school.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. I would say I'm an instructor and a counselor here, so the biggest takeaway for me, I think, is to think about how to integrate storytelling and singing and dancing more into the work that I do.
You should definitely do more dancing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Thanks for sharing.
I feel resonated with so many thoughts. I consider an individual growth is like engineering project with incorporate multiple aspects in terms of both breadth and depth. I totally agree with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Rain and Jim, would you like to share as well, please?
So I'm also an instructor here, and I teach English 101 is one of my primary classes, which everyone comes to and no one really wants to take. And one of the things that I've embraced is it's really about helping them become students, not how to learn how to write or learn what's coming out of my class, but to go through an experience that makes them better students and better people. And so everything, just knowing that there are other people that have that same view of education. I am curious because you talked about that aspect of human nature. If you're familiar with the work of Douglas Rushkoff, and especially his team human approach to response to AI or looks at education, it's a very human-centered approach that I'm also trying to take in my own response to AI as a teacher. So this is great. Like everything you had to say fits so well and informed the philosophy that I'm pursuing here.
Thank you. I have not read Team Human, but I know of David Rushkoff was his first name. Yeah. But yes, I mean we're very much on the same side here because we're inventing something that we have not grasped the full consequences of, and the people who have grasped it are not necessarily serving our best interests. So we need to up our attention here and do it fast. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing, Jim. And as instructors, we have this huge responsibility to almost initiate that, right? And it's not just a bottom-up thing. So Jim was actually part of a gamification of assessments workshop with me just a couple weeks ago, where we were talking about how to gamify the experience of learning. And I mean, you had great things to say, and I won't babble on, but this reminded me of ChatGPT from earlier, where when there was this huge push, oh, you have to declare if you're using ChatGPT in your assignments or ban it or whatever else. I was teaching a cohort of international students from Japan at the time, and I was encouraging the use of ChatGPT because I was like, yes, finally, like English doesn't have to be a barrier in this business classroom. It was about data-driven sustainable business modeling, and if they're brilliant in Japanese, and so they need to express that in English because they're in my classroom and taking a class in the US. I was so excited when ChatGPT finally became accessible, but that was not the response I was sensing overall. So that reminded me of like using the tools that we are having introduced to us as society as a bridge to gaps that we might identify, instead of being like, oh no, cheating is going to become such a thing now. So thank you so much for sharing. Rain, would you like to express your biggest takeaway? Or
I guess I am.
all right.
Hi.
Cool.
Wendy. One of my biggest takeaways from this and the book is just how much they knew about human development hundreds of years ago. And currently we're like, oh wow, this is new things that we just learned, even though it was already in practice back then. And if they could do it then and in practice and lift people up, then we can find a way to do it now. We just gotta band together and do it.
Excellent, thank you.
So my biggest takeaway from this is actually something that I've just been sort of absorbing from the universe lately anyway. But I grew up with a lot of isolation, and I did not ever be in a school for more than 2 years in my entire life. I just was never given any kind of opportunity to have real education. And since coming to school here, that's been like something given to me, and I'm like thriving. And I never had that in my entire life. And thinking about how the happiest countries on the Forbes list every year are actually, that happy because so many of the bad things are no longer stressors, because they got educated enough to not have to be completely bogged down by those very things that most of all of my life I have been bogged down by. And I look at how much feel so far behind everyone else in education, and at the same time, my whole life is a reflection of all those stressful things, and they correlate so strongly. And then I come here and I start getting like a real chance at education, and it's like I've stepped into a vortex, and all of a sudden my life is turned into like luck. And it's like, where did this come from? And it's like education. And so it's really interesting to me to listen to you talk and hear the correlation between my own personal experiences and what's going on with the Nordic countries and why they get to be so happy. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Education is a lifelong process, both inside school and outside schools. For example, I got education in early stage, like received a lot of things from my parents, and I also got a lot of inspiration from my friends, from my former colleagues and the classmates. They totally shaped my life. Without them, I could not be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for sharing your biggest takeaways, and thank you, Lena, for being here today. We all really appreciate you. I'm going to hand the mic to Wendy, who will now say our goodbyes and wrap things up.
Well, thank you everybody who showed up and shared your thoughts. That was great.
Hi, I'm Wendy again. I am just pretty much going to say thanks to everybody. Special thanks to Bob for introducing us to Lena, right? Okay. Jim and the Epic team for the great setup and all the tech things. Dan Tarker for his help with publicizing to the whole student union. Jordan and the Pacific Asian Islanders team for setting up the stage and then all this great decorations everywhere for their event tomorrow. Special thanks to Lena for coming all this way and sharing everything and giving us all this great knowledge, and we will use it for good in the future. And then for everybody here and on our live stream, you guys can follow us, see what's going on at the Impactful Investing Club at Impactful Investing Club on Instagram. We keep that up to date. So, and then also on behalf of the club, we would like to present you with a gift that I will stall for time as they get it. Yeah. So, where's everybody from? How you doing tonight? Yeah. Cool, great stuff. Apologize for a little bit of disorganization. It's our first time. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And a little something down here.
Yeah, a little goodie bag.
Goodie bag. I love goodie bags. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. I guess that's all. Thanks everyone for coming and your participation.